A chill settled over the tall grass and winding dirt paths leading to the old well. Even on the warmest summer nights, the breeze that drifted through this lonely stretch of countryside seemed to draw its breath from something ancient and unquiet. It was the very air, they said, carried whispers of wishes heard and granted. Yet the villagers tried not to speak too loudly about the well's rumored powers, for those who drank from its darkness risked losing far more than they gained. I was first told about the well by my grandmother during a bout of fever when I was 10. I remember her standing over me, face lined with age and sorrow, telling me a story about a place that had once granted her mother a desperate wish, and then taken something precious in return. With every word she made me swear to stay away from it. She described it as a silent sentinel on a patch of earth turned brittle and strange. After that, as I grew older, I heard only hushed fragments, tales of children disappearing, families torn apart, livestock found drained of life near that rock-lipped mouth in the ground. Every rumor painted it a monument of despair. Yet, rumors are powerful. They coil and slither in lonely hearts. By the time I was 20, my farmland we lived on struggled under a vicious drought. Crops wilted daily, and the well on our own property ran dry. In desperation, I found myself thinking of that shadowed well rumored to grant wishes. I knew my father wouldn't have approved, recalling his own mother's warning. He was too devout, insisting that ill luck was part of life's cycle, and that our family pride did not stoop to such superstitions. But fever blurred the lines of reason, and as I watched my father fade, I felt my resolve grow. If this well, as terrible as it was, truly had the power to grant my wish for his recovery, perhaps I could risk everything. One moonless night I walked the craggy path toward the old well. The moon was hidden behind a thick layer of clouds, as if the very sky tried to shield itself from witnessing my folly. My lantern flame flickered in the wind, drawing distorted shapes on the ground. The grass hissed at my ankles, and I thought I sensed shapes shifting beyond my vision. I pressed on until I reached it. The well stood half-collapsed, moss covering its stones, and ivy tangled across its mouth. It loomed as a ring of darkness in the gloom. My heart thudded with every step toward it. When I reached the rim, I placed my lantern at my feet and listened. Strange echoes rose from below, as though something breathed faintly in the pit. I called out, my voice trembling, the well returning only a soft whisper. The breeze died, and in the sudden silence I stepped closer, peering into the blackness. The rumors had warned that the well was hungry. A shiver of unease ran up my spine. I had come to make a wish, for my father to recover from his illness, for our land to bloom again. I had also come expecting to offer some piece of myself as a price. But I realized in that moment that the cost might be more horrifying than anything I could conceive. With a trembling breath, I dropped a single silver coin into the well, a keepsake from my late grandmother. The coin's tinkling resonance was devoured by the depths. I waited. At first there was only silence, then, faintly, I heard it, whispering. A voice, neither male nor female, old nor young, seeped from the well's interior. It spoke in a language I could not understand. Still, I felt its intention coil around my mind. Something intangible pricked at my chest, as though demanding more than a mere trinket. I closed my eyes and whispered my wish. Grant me water from my father's fields and restore him to health. I offer my devotion, my hopes. Let me pay whatever price you demand, so long as my father returns to me whole. In an instant, a gust of foul air erupted from the well, blowing out my lantern. I stumbled backward, choking on the stench of rotting leaves and stagnant water. Opening my eyes, I saw only a vague flicker of moonlight that had slipped from behind the clouds. For a split second, I thought I'd glimpsed a shadow climb the edge of the well and vanish past me, slithering into the darkness beyond my sight. My blood turned to ice. Had the well taken something from me? Had it granted my wish? Fear and hope battled in my heart as I hurried home, the darkness lapping at my heels like a hungry tide. By morning, I half convinced myself the terror I'd felt had been some feverish fancy. Then I walked to the fields. Where the soil had been baked and cracked the day before, I found signs of moisture, as though a gentle rain had passed in the night. The crops, still wilted, were not yet restored, but the sight of damp soil almost brought tears to my eyes. When I went inside, I found my father sleeping soundly, with deeper, more rhythmic breaths. His fever had broken. Hope surged in my chest. I believed the well had answered me. But soon strange incidents arose. Mother discovered that every mirror in the house had fractured the night before, and she ushered me away from the shards, muttering about omens. The house was tinged with a scent of decay we could not locate, as if something had crawled in between the walls. My father, though seemingly cured of his fever, began to sleepwalk at night, stumbling into the hallway and trying to speak in a voice thick with phlegm. Each time I guided him back to bed, I could not help but remember the voice I had heard whispering from the well. I hardly slept, frightened by the notion that something had followed me from that place and found a home among us. Spring arrived, bringing rains aplenty. Our fields flourished, a blessing we had not known for many seasons. Yet the dread that had begun to fester in me did not subside. My father's eyes, once kind and clear, now held a murky glow. Sometimes, when we spoke, I felt an uncanny presence behind them, as if I was looking at a stranger who wore my father's face. At other times, he was the same man I had always known, tender and jovial when the sun was out, but at night, if he chanced to stir, I could not shake the sense of being watched by something alien. One evening, while I lay trying to sleep, I heard Father's footsteps in the hallway. The door to my room creaked open. I pretended to sleep, my heart climbing into my throat. He loomed in the doorway, breathing steadily. My skin prickled as I heard his voice in a guttural murmur. Speaking words that defied reason, I heard a faint scraping near the floor as though something with clawed feet tapped across the wooden boards. I remained motionless, fear rooting me to the bed. Eventually the footsteps receded. The next morning, as he ate his porridge, Father seemed well enough, though his gaze flitted nervously along the walls, as if expecting to see something creeping there. Mother tried to dismiss any mention of these oddities. She was relieved to see him physically recovered, so she turned a blind eye to other changes. But I could not ignore them. I remembered that the well demanded something precious. It had indeed given us good health and fertile land. Could it now be consuming my father's spirit as payment? Guilt gnawed at me. I questioned if he might have been better off never recovered than to live as a host for something unearthly. I resolved to go back to beg mercy, or at least negotiate with the power inside that pit, to reason with whatever entity resided in that well. Surely it wouldn't want my father as a puppet. Perhaps I could offer it something else to let him go free. When I made my second trek, dusk had already arrived and the sky was painted in brilliant violets and oranges. This time, my steps were slow and measured. Fear threatened my resolve, but guilt urged me on. I couldn't allow my father's soul to be lost. The well appeared in the gloom, more ominous than I remembered. As I peered again into the fathomless interior, I set my lantern on the stones. "You've taken something from me," I whispered. "Give it back. You cannot have my father. I'll offer something else." Barely had the words left my lips when something skittered across my foot. I stumbled, dropping my lantern. It shattered, snuffing out the flame. I cried out, searching for whatever had touched me. The darkness closed in, revealing only warped shapes. I pressed my hands along the well's cold stones, steeling my courage. Something inside it began to stir, a distant movement of water, or perhaps scales scraping rock. "Return him," I begged. I felt a prickling at the back of my neck, followed by a creeping chill that slid along my spine. The well's presence reached into me, filling my ears with a chorus of whispers. I sensed its words in my mind rather than hearing them aloud, as if each swirl of air carried a foreign message. "You cannot undo your wish. The bargain has been sealed. Pushing against the stone lip, I tried to stand firm, determined to show no cowardice, but I was trembling. "Take me instead, then," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "Leave him be." The darkness around me deepened, as though swallowing the last vestiges of light. In that oppressive blackness, the well's answer arrived without warning. There came a sound like the beating of a massive heart somewhere beneath the earth, pulsing through the stones, pounding into my marrows. I closed my eyes, straining to remain upright. And then it stopped abruptly. There was no voice, no breath of wind, only stillness. Exhausted and uncertain if my plea had been heard or refused, I turned to go home, but a scalding pain tore through my shoulder. I cried out, nearly toppling. Whirling to see what had harmed me, my lantern's dim glow revealed a stake of old wood that had jutted from the well's perimeter. The wind must have shifted it just enough to slice across my flesh. I clutched the wound, steeling myself against the thought that the well might have intentionally lashed out. With a shaking hand, I collected what remained of my lantern and fled. At home, Father was awake, waiting in the parlor. He rose to greet me, eyes flicking over my injured shoulder. Dim candlelight traced unusual angles in his face. He stepped forward, voice trembling with concern. "You went back to the well? You fool! You didn't trust it?" It was the first time in weeks that he had directly acknowledged something was amiss. My throat tightened. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "I was trying to free you." I stepped closer and his gaze flickered oddly, as if something behind his own eyes recoiled. I saw anguish there, anguish that made me wonder if, for a moment, the real Father I remembered was fighting to resurface. Then his face slackened, and his mouth drew into a grim line. Something about the moment felt final, as though a secret threshold had been crossed, never to be undone. I spent the next few days in a kind of delirium. My shoulder wound wanted to fester. At night, my father often stood by my door. Sometimes I felt him gently press against it from the hallway, listening. I avoided him during the day, focusing on chores in the barn or the fields, though the earth itself now felt tainted. What had once been our joyful farmland now radiated an aura of quiet, predatory watchfulness, and I couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes following me. The final sign that shook my belief in everything came on a stormy afternoon. Thunder rumbled on the horizon, and the animals in our barn stirred restlessly. Mother was away visiting a neighbor, hoping to trade produce or gather new seeds for the next season's planting. Father was supposed to be chopping wood in the back field, but I noticed he had vanished. Large drops of rain hammered the roof, and I watched from a window as a figure emerged from the family cemetery on the far side of our land. At first I thought it was a trick of the storm, but I squinted through the gloom and recognized his posture. Father stood there, arms outstretched, facing an old gravestone. There was an unnatural stillness to him. Even the wind seemed reluctant to approach. I threw on a cloak and rushed outside, letting the rain pelt me numb as I sprinted for the cemetery. Lightning flashed just as I reached him, illuminating his face. He looked distraught, tears mixing with rain on his cheeks. A jolt of sympathy struck me. Was he regaining his mind? He turned toward me. His eyes were filled with desperation. "I'm being devoured," he breathed over the thunder's roar. "Daughter, I see them. They are hungry. It wants more, more." He shuddered violently, lips drawing back into a grimace as if wrestling with an invisible foe. Lightning lit up the sky again. In that flicker, I swear I saw smears of shadow swirling over my father's face, wreathing him in black coils. He clutched at me with shaking hands, leaving muddy streaks on my arms. I tried to steady him. "Come inside," I shouted. "We can fight this." His features flickered between fear and something monstrous. "You cannot fight it," he moaned. "It has taken root in me." Then his voice dropped to a whisper, raw with pain. "The well demands a sacrifice, something more precious than any talisman. If we do not provide it, we will lose everything." Before I could question him, he jerked away from my arms and bounded out of the cemetery with impossible speed, heading into the thick trees behind our field. I struggled to keep up, my boots sliding in the mud. He was calling out in that odd guttural language again, though occasionally I caught a word of anguish. He was leading me somewhere toward the well. Trees whipped at my face, the sky churning overhead in a relentless downpour. When we finally stumbled into the clearing where the ancient well stood, my heart sank. The place seemed more desolate than ever. The earth around it was black mud, and the well's rim glistened in the lightning like the jagged grin of an ancient beast. Father stopped in front of it, panting. "I'm sorry," he said, turning eyes upon me that were wild but brimming with tears. "It wants the heart of what you love most." His words rattled through me. I stepped back in horror, understanding what he meant. I was what Father loved most. The well was claiming me now. Lightning streaked again, illuminating our twisted silhouettes. The wind howled, and he advanced upon me. I saw the grim determination in his face, a paternal heartbreak. "I have to do this to release myself from its grip," he cried. "I never wanted this. The well has forced me." I tried to plead, to reason. My heart pounded with terror. No, that can't be the only way. There must be another choice. But my father was not entirely himself. His body shook with torment, and I could almost see the puppet strings of the well's influence forcing him forward. He lunged at me, knocking me onto the mud. I scrabbled away, legs sliding awkwardly as I tried to stand. With each crack of thunder, I caught glimpses of his twisted expression. Tears poured down his cheeks, even as he reached for my arms. I fought back with everything I had, but his grip was stronger than ever before. The well loomed behind us, eager to feed on another sacrifice. Somehow my cry pierced the veil of his mania, and for the briefest moment his eyes cleared. "Run," he rasped, voice thick with guilt. Then he clutched his head, staggering backward. I used the moment to pick up a loose rock and swing it at him, not to harm but to free myself. He fell sideways, catching himself on one hand. I scrambled to my feet, breath sharp with fear. He roared in the thunder and advanced again, yet I noticed he had tears streaming freely. "Forgive me," he shouted into the storm. Then his gaze flicked to the well. "Take me," he screamed. "Isn't my life enough?" He seized the jagged stone lip and stared into the swirling darkness below. The wind howled, and I could feel the well's malevolent presence pressing in on us. I lunged for my father's arm, trying to pull him away from the edge. For a moment it seemed I might succeed. But a sickening jolt ran through his body, as if an invisible force yanked him forward. He slipped from my grasp, plunging into the well with a cry that echoed and was lost in the thunder's roar. Time froze, rain hammered the clearing, thunder raged overhead, and I stood at the well's edge, staring into the blackness. "Father," I screamed, voice cracking. No reply came. The wind died, leaving an unearthly silence in its wake, broken only by the incessant patter of rain against stone. The well felt sated for the moment, as if it had claimed its due. Numbness seeped through me. I knelt at the edge, tears mingling with the rain, certain that I had lost him forever. The well had devoured the most precious thing in my life. It was the price for my wish-a-devouring wish that had come to collect its final toll. On trembling legs, I remained there, half delirious, calling his name into the dark. The rain eventually lessened to a drizzle. At some point, I stumbled back alone, forced inside by the approach of night. Mother had returned home. I told her through choking sobs what had happened. She didn't believe me at first, or perhaps she refused to believe. She clutched my shoulders, face pale, as she demanded that I tell her it was some hideous dream, but my trembling, sodden form was all the proof she needed. Her screams joined mine, filling that haunted house with an anguish that could not be consoled. A search party formed the following morning. They scoured the area, checking the well with ropes and lanterns. Father's body was never found, though those brave enough to descend swore the bottom was choked with something foul. a mire of old bones and rotting debris. Some told me in hushed tones that they saw footprints etched into the slick stone walls, as though a creature with monstrous limbs had clambered up and down. But no matter how intently they searched, there was no trace of my father, living or dead. I spent the next few months in endless grief, racked by guilt. The farmland thrived in cruel mockery. Our harvest was bountiful for the first time in years. Neighbors marveled at our success, but I found no solace in it. Each thriving crop reminded me that it was purchased at the cost of my father's sacrifice. At night, I locked my door, lighting every candle I could, until exhaustion claimed me. In my dreams, I was back at the well's edge, hearing my father's voice echo from its depths, begging me to rescue him. As the months rolled by, a rumor spread that the old well in the countryside granted wishes. I overheard whispered conversations in the village of a desperate mother whose child overcame a deadly fever after she dropped a precious pendant into that pit. A farmhand claimed his luck turned overnight when he tossed in a shard of family heirloom. None of them did more than mention the cost, usually in passing. Unsettling coincidences of livestock gone missing, or a child's beloved pet found lying lifeless. Always, the rumors suggested that the well's hunger wasn't sated by mere tokens. It demanded what was closest to your heart, one way or another. Mother forbade me from speaking about father's fate. She insisted we bury that grief, wanting neither pity nor censure from the community that might brand us cursed. The farmland continued to prosper. We managed to sustain ourselves in relative comfort, but the emptiness in our home was inescapable. Some days I roamed the hills alone, haunted by misty recollections. I would pause and stare at the dusty road leading toward that black structure of rock. I vowed never again to step near the well. The very thought of it made my stomach churn. One evening, as the light of day began to fade, I stood at the fence bordering our property, watching crows gather in the lower field. My thoughts drifted, and I wondered if Father's spirit might still linger somewhere, waiting for my help. The memory of his eyes, so panicked and desperate, cut me like a knife, yet my guilt had shifted into resolve. I knew I would not let the well claim any more victims if I could help it. Quietly, I gathered some supplies and walked there one final time. Dusk cast the countryside in muted shades of gray. The well stood as a blot on the landscape, reeking of quiet menace. My hands shook, but my anger and sorrow were stronger than my fear. I recalled the stories of individuals trying to seal away malevolent places. Perhaps, if I collapsed the well in on itself, no one else would be tempted by its murky bargains. With trembling determination, I worked by moonlight, gathering stones and earth. In the gloom, I sensed the well's malice, bristling, as if reacting to my presence. Whispered voices slithered through my mind. Threats, pleas, promises of wonders it could still offer me if I abandoned my plan. I steeled myself and began to tear vines from the surrounding trees, lashing them together into crude ropes. I rolled the largest boulders I could manage toward the well, each one a Herculean effort. The ground was wet, forcing me to contend with slipping boots and churning mud. I felt a surge of defiance as I heaved a hefty stone onto the well's rim. The structure groaned, a low rumble echoing upward, as though something below raged in protest. Small stones dislodged and clattered into the abyss, each one swallowed by watery gulps, but I didn't relent. My father's final words still rang in my ears. You cannot fight it. Yet, fight it I must. As I forced the last large rock onto the opening, thunder growled in the distance. The well's edge cracked beneath the weight, collapsing inward. A resonant roar erupted from the darkness, stirring a wind that blasted me with dirt and gravel. The rope of vines snapped, sending the boulder tumbling with a thunderous crash into the depths. Earth and rubble fell behind it, burying the well's mouth. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a shape. An elongated shadow stretched up from the pit, only to vanish beneath the onslaught of stone. Panting and covered in mud, I sank to my knees, tears mingling with sweat on my cheeks. My ears still rang with the final echoes of the collapse. The well was sealed, or so I hoped. Would it remain buried? Or had I roused its anger beyond mortal reckoning? At last, I got to my feet and trudged away beneath a grim sky. The new barrier might only be temporary, but I had done what I could. Night pressed in around me, the air filled with the faint scent of ozone from the distant storm. I gazed back just once. The remains of the well jutted up like a broken tooth, half buried in the earth. No voices followed me, no presence clung to my mind. I had robbed it of easy prey, at least for the time being. I returned home exhausted, sliding into bed without a word. That night I dreamed of Father's face, peaceful and free. For the first morning in weeks, I woke feeling an unsteady glimmer of hope. Maybe his spirit had found rest, and maybe no new fool would be drawn into that malignant pit. Still, I sometimes wake to the patter of rain late at night, gazing out my window to see if the stones have shifted, if some ghastly force has stirred anew. I wonder if perhaps the well's greed might spark a new path, an unseen crack in the rubble. Even if the well remains buried, I can never recall my wish without remembering the price it exacted, and so I live, uncomfortably aware of how close I came to ruin, and how easily the well's lure could snare the unsuspecting. I live with the memory of my father, who gave himself in my place, in a final act of love that even the well could not devour. The land thrives, but there is a silent sorrow running through it, an undercurrent reminding me that no fortune comes without a sacrifice, and somewhere beneath the dirt and collapsed stones, I imagine the well lurks like a sleeping beast. Its hunger has been stifled, but not destroyed. Should the barrier fail, its whispers will rise again, calling out to those desperate enough to cast their hopes into the darkness and pay the devouring wish in kind.